As usual, I'm not going to be able to see all of you. Who can I see? Diane, I can see your face. Can you see where it says single agent brokerage relationship? Give me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I hear you. I may have gone over this with you before, but I would like all of us, myself included, there's no harm in refreshing your memory on some things. We all learned this when we got our real estate license. Florida is a very strange state, which is awesome. I like the less rules, the better for me. But then when there's less rules, then everyone makes up their own rules. And that makes it very difficult to do business. What I want to emphasize, I'm hearing this from a lot of us. And again, when I say this to you, like I say, hold on, somebody's trying to get back in. When I say this stuff to you, again, I made every single mistake that I am warning you about. I made them all. So I'm not any different than anybody else, but I would just love to save you from the agony that took all these years to get here. So this is why Florida is weird. In other states, they have things called dual agency. They make their customers, before they even take them out, sign relationship disclosures. So, what I need you to understand is exclusive buyer broker agreements, listing agreements, and when you work with someone, they're different than these brokerage relationship disclosures. And I really wish that we were forced to do this again and explain it. I mean, I know we use the exclusive buyer broker agreement transaction broker, but it doesn't necessarily narrow in on what being a transaction broker is. So I'm going to tell you what's not Florida first, real quick. What I recently discovered was we don't do dual agency, but we sort of do, because how could you not? But we don't call it that. Dual agency is when ABC Brokerage has a listing agent that works for ABC Brokerage and is a single agent to the buyer. And then listing agent is a single agent to the seller. And then ABC Brokerage agent brings in a buyer who they have a single agency with. And so you have two agents that work for the same company and they're single agents, and that's called dual agency. So we're not allowed to do that, because what you guys need to understand and always refresh your memory is you do not own your listings. They're not yours. If you leave a brokerage and you sign something that the brokerage says you have to leave your listings with them, you have to. You have a real estate license, and even if you have a broker license, as I do, I'm not a broker, I'm a broker associate. I have a broker. The broker owns my listing. So you have to remember that if there's two agents involved in the transaction from the same brokerage, we're transaction brokers. That's why I tell you guys, they're not your clients. My one broker yelled, corrected me over and over and said, stop saying client. If you ever go to court, client means single agent. All the seller or the buyer has to do is say, Sherry called me her client. And this is what having a client means. You have to deal with them honestly and fairly, loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, full disclosure. Um, some of this goes for both. Accounting for all funds, you have to do that anyway. Skill, care, and diligence in the transaction, presenting all offers in a timely manner, and disclosing, we have to do this. But the difference is in what we don't owe obedience. We don't owe confidentiality, I think, and full disclosure. So This is completely different. And here's the problem. And again, this is natural and human nature. If you work with a seller and it's your listing, and you'll hear me slip up and say it too, you know, my customer, and we insert what we think is best for our customer into the transaction. And that's the problem. When I have learned not to take an inspection report and tell the buyer, oh my God, you need to fix this. This is, the dishwasher is not latched properly. There's a leak in the roof. The GFCI outlets are not working. There's termites. You got to fix all of that. The minute I start doing that, first of all, I'm upsetting the buyer. They're freaking out. I'm freaking out because I need this to close. And now I'm freaking out. Oh my God, there's so much wrong with the house. I have to do this. I have to look like a superhero. No. That's why you have a licensed inspector. That's why I like it when the buyers go to inspection. If they can't go, make sure your inspector, sometimes they're out of state or they just can't go for whatever reason. I actually put Joey on FaceTime, not speaker, FaceTime with the buyer and say, go ahead and go over the end of the report with them. Even though they get mailed a copy with photos, I want them to see his facial expressions. There are some inspectors that'll go hog wild and they're going to insert their opinion in everything. Joey is so calm that when I get lucky that they choose him, I already know he's going to be like, look, there's a leak in the roof over here. It's not a big deal. It's $1,000 to fix. Let's do it. Or, by the way, the termites are eating the entire house. You've got to have it tented. But he's calm. Again, this goes back to presenting the facts. The minute you represent yourself as an inspector, appraiser, lawyer, you are an inspector, appraiser, or lawyer. And 9 out of 10 times, nothing's going to happen. But the one time it does, you're jeopardizing your license, your family's finances, and your reputation. And everyone's going to get upset. So no matter what one side is asking or doing, if we, and Chris and I totally just had this discussion. You are the calming factor. Why? And you can disagree with me. Don't go to your inspections, appraisals, and don't go to your closing. That's fine. My reason for going there is, especially when I go to the closing, I'm the entertainer. For me, this is the most traumatic or important thing that a buyer or a seller is doing. And me being there and having casual conversation and aren't you excited, or just making sure, again, having a closing with all parties is pretty rare now. My job is to make sure all their questions are answered. There's no weird expressions on their faces where they're too embarrassed to ask Carol about, why they're paying a half a year's worth of taxes at closing. I know they don't understand that. And just making it a party. That's my job. A lot of people, a lot of listing agents say they don't go to the inspection because they don't want to know what's going on. And once they know, they kind of have to disclose it. But sometimes you can go to a certain point, let everyone in, make sure everything's okay, make sure the seller's not there, et cetera, et cetera. But as a buyer's, I was going to say as a buyer's agent, when I work with a buyer, I definitely go to the inspection. And again, if that's not the way you practice real estate, there's many different ways. That's fine. It's just I like to go there because I kind of want to know what's going on. And then I want to see what the inspector says. And is the inspector making the buyers crazy? I've had that. And the more you do real estate, the more you're going to have that, where they said, oh my God, in Loxahatchee, we all built our houses on sand. So it's kind of common that's in some areas, especially like in the garage, there's a little bit of cracking. Um, as long as it's not all the way up the ceiling, it's not that bad of a thing. But if the buyer's going to go off the rails and if the inspector is going to make them nuts, instead of you, like Chris says, matching their crazy, you are entitled to extend the inspection period and have a structural engineer come and see if it's okay. No opinion. call me or call someone else, freak out and be like, I can't, my deal's gonna fall apart because not to anyone else, not to the listing agent, not to the buyers. If you think you're uncomfortable about that crack, just let me know. I'll give you 3 structural engineers and we'll extend the inspection period and feel free to check it out and put that in writing. And if they say, great, we're going to do that, again, do you feel, I feel relieved. I'm like, oh, thank God they're not going to blame me that they move in and the house is structurally, I'd rather them get a professional to come in. And if they say no, I have it in an email saying, no, we don't want to spend the $500 to save 50,000 later. Um, if something like that happens. So we are transaction brokers. There are some instances where you might want to be a single agent. Unfortunately, price shouldn't matter, but it does. If you're listing a $5 million house and you explain to them that you work for the transaction and not them, they might get a little upset. So you might want to sell yourself by saying, in somebody who you could tell would really like to hear this. And again, buyers and sellers don't even understand what this is. They think you work for them all the time anyway. You can start with a single agency. So let's say Michelle had a listing in Jacksonville, she's a single agent, and then I bring her the buyer. Then she would have to transition to transaction because it's 2 agents with the same brokerage and we don't do dual agency. So that comes full circle of what I was explaining. Any questions so far? And I can't see you, so open your mic. Okay. I want to show you something that I keep getting confused saying, do I need this? And the answer is yes. No brokerage relationship. Can anyone tell me when you would, in 2025, in February, who would you have sign this? Anyone? Okay. I talked to many agents about this. So let's say you're doing an open house, unrepresented buyers come in, they don't have to sign anything, but you're not allowed to talk to them at all about anything about the home, the motivation of the sellers. That is not readily available to anyone. You can't talk about their financing. You can't steer them in the direction of Kyle. If it's an open house, you give them all your marketing material, your literature that everybody can see, and then and then we go forward. The minute you start talking to them about price, about a 7-day inspection period, about anything like that, they have to sign something. And those go back to, now this is where it gets confusing, those go back to the exclusive buyer broker relationships. Each of your brokerage wants you to sign the exclusive buyer broker. I did not have somebody sign that. Let me give you an example. They called me from Zillow and they wanted to see my listing. My job is to get as many eyes on that property as possible. I didn't ask them if they were qualified or anything like that yet. I'm not allowed. I said, I will be more than happy to show you my listing, but you're going to have to sign some sort of brokerage relationship form. And she said, yes. Okay, great. So I had her and this is me, go for the gusto, go for the highest form you can. But she called the day before. I did a single property showing, a pre-touring agreement, and I wrote in the bottom, it's just for this house because I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to sign it. And then here's the deal. It is now my job. I never met them before. I didn't even talk to her. We went by text. It's my job to win her over and make her my customer. That's my job. When I make her my customer, she's going to sign the exclusive buyer broker agreement. She's not going to use anybody else. But if somebody wants to see one of my properties listed, but I know I talk too much. And I know that if it's somebody who's coming in off the street to get me in trouble and they're out there, I had to make them sign something. And she said yes. If she said no, I wouldn't be able to show her the house. My license isn't worth it. And I would tell the seller she's not serious. I gave her the least invasive document to sign to protect you and me, and she wouldn't sign it. So she's going to have, I couldn't do it. But thankfully she said yes. And it was the way I presented it to her. Next, to answer my own question, let me give you an example. Um, Fiona has a whole bunch of listings and she gets people that are lawyers or they are investors and they don't want her to represent them. And they say that. I want to see your listing, but I don't want you to represent me. Like these are savvy people. They understand that. Guess what? They have to sign this if they want to see it. And every single one of them does, because usually if they say, I don't want you to represent me, they know what it is. This is saying that Florida law requires that real estate licensee who do not have a relationship with a potential seller or buyer, we must disclose this. I have to deal with you honestly and fairly, disclosing all facts and account and trust of funds. But it's missing obedience. It's missing all those other things that are the responsibility of a realtor. And I've had Aviva had this. These are people who say, I'm going to write my own contract or I'm going to hire a lawyer, to do it. And then when they come in and they sign this, you cannot answer any questions that, would you give them suggestions, right? You show them the home. You tell them everything that everybody else can see, and this protects you. And again, do not let fear, don't be afraid that if you make them sign something and they won't sign it, that the seller is going to get mad at you. And don't have the fear that the buyer won't come to your showing because you're making them sign something. They have to. And then the next sentence out of your mouth is going to be, well, they're going to go find an agent that isn't going to follow the law and they're just going to show it to them anyway. Awesome. Let them get in trouble. The dangling carrot that they might be the buyers for this house, if they're going to be so stubborn, you probably don't want to work with them anyway. And you need to practice how to present this to them. You're not saying, good luck. I don't care about you. I'm not going to help you at all. You're like, and don't make yourself a victim either. Prove your worth. Don't say, well, the law changed August 1st and now I have to do this and blah, blah. I don't say that. You're confusing people. I promise you, again, there's one-offs who will know more than you do or think they know more than you do. And especially this newer agents, or if you go into a new price bracket, you start to get insecure and you have to control your customer. And they will appreciate that, I promise. If they say, no, another agent's not going to make me sign anything, you say, awesome. Unfortunately, I can't work that way. I need you to sign one of these three, whichever it is, of the buyer broker agreements. And if you don't want me to work with you at all, I'm going to give you a document that's going to say you don't want to work with me at all. And if they won't sign this, cross it out and put they won't sign it and let them initial it. I've done that. Say buyer refuses to sign. And you have that and you have their initials. They absolutely have to sign something. Any questions on this?
Hi, Marjolisa. Quick
Yep.
question. I do so much open house, and when I'm doing the open house, remember that list that we went and made for that house on Key Lime? So you're saying that if it's not all the other information, I cannot tell somebody about?
I don't think we left, guys, we wrote a list of all the things that are new with the house. It's like over 2 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't leave anything out, but we can't tell them that they have another house in St. Augustine and they're moving,
Okay.
unless the seller says it's okay to say.
Okay. But we could
So
tell
if
them everything else about the property.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Now, if they have an agent, you can talk to the agent and say, are they qualified or blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. If they have no agent, and they're asking you how much money the seller will take. How do I get a loan? I have a
Oh,
house
I
to
always,
sell.
yeah, I always say,
Yeah. Then they have to sign something. And I have these
me
in my
too.
bag. I have all of them, right? And okay, this is being recorded, but have I forgotten and gotten so excited that there's an unrepresented buyer? Woohoo! Yeah, I forget. I have a big mouth. So that's why I make sure that I get something signed. And I would rather have a buyer pissed off, a potential buyer who's not even, I don't even know them. Maybe they can't even afford it. I'd rather have them mad at me than someone investigating me that I did something wrong. So, any more questions on this? I want to show you one last thing. Okay, flood disclosure. Please, 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 if you are a Rockstar listing agent, you're going to put this in your listing in the MLS. When you take the listing, this is going to be another disclosure. So here's the weird thing, and I'm running into this a lot. I know we've gone over it. I want to go over it again. The seller's disclosure is not required by law, but we like to have it, and the buyer's agent's going to ask you for it. And if you don't give it, they're going to wonder why you're not giving it. So you ask the seller nicely 3 times to fill it out, and I've been separating it from, like, you know how we have them electronically sign everything? Sometimes I leave it there, say, this really isn't that important until somebody's interested in the property. So you have about a week to fill it out. Um, or I say, if they're savvy, I make it so that they can fill it out electronically and they'll fill it out. And I put this in the listing. Okay, number one, I do not want buyer's agents. I love my freedom. I don't want people asking me questions when the answer's already there. So go look in the document. I mean, of course, I'll answer it, but hopefully they're smart and they go look in the document section. That's what I do before I ask any listing agent a question. I go in the document section and see if it's answered. Because, and then if they say to me, it's in the document section, I'm like, oh my God, I'm that agent. I'm sorry. And then they laugh and tell me the answer. And I'm like, I apologize. Look what this says. So here's the deal. The real seller's property disclosure is not required, it's recommended. The flood disclosure is required, but that's not part of the listing contract of the buyer, sorry, of the as is FAR bar contract. So annoying. And I do not recommend you click other and put it on the line and make it a part of it, just because there's reasons, and we'll get into that another time. But read this. Florida statute requires the seller to complete and provide a flood disclosure to a purchaser of a residential real estate at or before the time the sales contract is executed. When is the sales contract executed? It might be executed when you are working with a buyer and you present an offer. It might be executed right away. And if you don't have, I don't know what's going to happen if you date it February 12th, the contract, and then February 14th, you date this flood disclosure. I haven't asked anyone. Does that mean my sales contract is not executed? That would be pretty scary. Um, it will, again, I don't mean to frighten you. Everything goes fine. But if the seller and the buyer get into an argument and Greg Cohen comes in and says, send me all the documents, and he goes, well, this was signed after, so you don't even have a valid contract. Just, you don't want that. So that's why we have a second set of eyes. That's why we have transaction coordinators. Um, yes, I've forgotten to make sure everybody's doing this. So I wanted to reiterate that when you're writing the offer, ask the listing agent for the flood disclosure. When you take the listing, be that rock star, put this in the documents. And when someone's writing an offer, you tell them, did you download, did you go in the document section and look at the flood disclosure? Please include that with your offer, because not everybody's as well prepared as we are. We had a discussion about this with my brokers. Some agents are, and I don't know why, listen, FAR is not necessarily smarter than us. They're putting in here signature for the buyer. Like, why is there no initial for the buyer here that they got it? Nowhere. But it's required. It just says copy provided to the buyer. I mean, I can make this up. And then I have to prove that I emailed it to them. So, um, I'm not going to make you do this just yet, but I think going forward, I just decided right now I'm always going to have a buyer initial this because it's foolish. Might as well have them sign it. And you better make sure all the dates match the executed date or before the executed date of the contract. That way we don't run into trouble. I'm not, before I close this out, I just want to let you guys know I'm not trying to scare you at all. I am trying to make us unemotionally involved, not attached. If we follow the laws, the forms, and the documents that we're supposed to have, and we present it in the tone of voice I'm presenting it to you now, you're not going to have a problem. Just remember, do not insert yourself in the transaction. If the buyer's agent, if the listing agent this wants you to tell the buyer something that is absolutely crazy, you don't say to the buyer, "Oh, this is crazy, blah blah." You just say to them, "Listen, seller wants wanted you to know XYZ. I'm letting you know." And they say, "I'm not doing that." And you say, "Okay, I totally understand. Just the messenger." And then you relay it back to the seller. You can't decide that that's an absolutely crazy request and you're not going to present it to whichever side it is. You have to present everything. And you can practice and learn how to speak to your customer so that they don't react the way you think. Back in the day, I said, "You are not going to believe this. The buyer wants you to pay $10,000 for a light bulb. Oh my God, that's absolutely insane. Why would you, now I'm riling up the seller." And they're like, "Yeah, we're not doing that." Now I just created a whole mess. Now I say, "Listen, buyer wants $10,000 credit for the inspection report. What do you think?" And they go, "I'll give them 5,000." I say, "Okay." And they go, "Well, what do you think?" I go, "Well, it's not what I think. Here's where they are. Here's what the inspection report says. What do you think we should do?" And they say, "Well, what do you think about 5,000?" I go, "Well, let's present that and see what happens. Maybe we'll come somewhere in the middle." I did not make any decisions and I didn't offer an opinion. Okay. I facilitated the transaction. Damn. That's mic drop. That's all I have to say. We are the facilitators. We have to remember that. And if you want to get emotional, call me. I love getting emotional. I'll get emotional with you. We can call everybody names. We could say how uneducated everybody is. Awesome. Take a deep breath and present the facts. And that should keep you out of real estate jail. That's all I have to say today. Any questions? Can I see a face? One face.
Always a
Thank
masterclass. Always a masterclass. Always a masterclass.
Thank you. It's
Always.
oh, there's another face. There we go. It is amazing. I'm not in real estate jail. It is amazing I'm not in real estate jail. So, all right, guys, I appreciate you all. Um, Thank you for coming.